Welcome to Purpose 360. I'm Carol Cohn, and today I have been waiting for this conversation for, I think, about 11 months. And I want to welcome back to the show Dave Heath, and he is one of the co-founders of Bombas. And we were on the show together in November 2022. And so much has transpired since then that we are running a series this year about longevity and about purpose brands and companies that are really so well structured that they are growing beautifully, continuing with their humanity, their great business insight, as well as helping society. So I had to have Dave back. He had a wonderful family event, which he may or may not want to talk about, but I got him back here. And so welcome back to the show, Dave.
Thanks, Carol. Excited to be back.
And thank you. And joining Dave is his CEO, Jason LaRose. And Jason joined the company, I believe, in 2024 as president. And then I guess you guys decided you really liked each other. And so Jason was promoted in May, almost a year now, 2025, to CEO. And I think the two of you are rocking it together. So welcome to the show, Jason.
Great. Thanks. Nice to be here, Carol.
It's wonderful. So what I'd love to do is I always like to start with a little bit of personal background from my guests. And so, and I always like to ask about what were those early life influences? And I know, Dave, your family, I guess your father was an entrepreneur, and I don't know Jason's backstory. So how about really briefly, Dave, talk about your backstory again and why you do what you do. And then we'll ask Jason the same. So Dave.
Great. So I grew up in the suburbs outside of New York City in Westchester County. And as you mentioned, my dad was an entrepreneur. I watched him start a business with $5,000 in the basement of our house and move it to a garage. And then the garage moved to an office. And, throughout all of those years, I remember helping him pack samples and go away on business trips. And whether it was a combination of nurture or nature, I just early on got bit by the business entrepreneur bug. So I was that annoying kid in your neighborhood who would knock on your door to ask if I could walk your dog, wash your car, clean your gutters. I just loved, enterprising. And I think my parents both instilled really good work values early on where, anything that I wanted that was superfluous outside of, the things that they would provide for me. I was really into Ninja Turtles and G.I. Joes. And so I just remember my parents saying, if you want it, you can work for it. And so I loved the idea of, enterprising and I worked throughout high school, I worked throughout college. And I think I always had my eyes set on one day starting my own company. So I went to school for entrepreneurship at Babs in college. And then, from the moment I graduated, every job I took with, this learning mindset around, learning something new that would help me become, one day a good entrepreneur.
Great. And Jason, what about your early life experiences and why do you do what you do today?
Yeah. Well, I didn't have any entrepreneurs in the family. I'm a kid from Detroit, first one in my family to go to college. So my parents were just, hoping I was going to, get my education and figure it out from there. But, after business school, I was lucky. I worked at McKinsey & Company for a good stretch and saw a lot of different companies when I was there and just found myself really attracted to premium brands, people who could tell great stories, make great product. And that's really where I got the bug. So then I was able to work at, places like L Brands and Equinox and Under Armour, all premium brands, in their own right. And in many cases work with great founders on the way there. And I think for me, I'm doing what I'm doing now because I'm attracted to those kinds of premium brands, but with founders. And in this case, I'd be kidding if I didn't say that the mission wasn't a huge part of my attraction to being partners with Dave and just, trying to make a difference, trying to run a company that can do good while we're making good profits as well. And it's been a wonderful match. As you mentioned, I've been here a couple of years and couldn't be happier with our partnership.
And how did you two meet? I'm just curious.
So I had hired a president years ago, I think back in probably 2018. And at the time there was, we were thinking about potential exit strategies, whether we were going to go strategic, or potentially take the company public. And as a first-time founder, first-time CEO, I realized that the business was starting to scale at a speed and pace that was far beyond my skill level. So we were lucky enough that I got introduced to the former CFO of Under Armour, who then went on to be the CFO and interim CEO at Blue Apron. And his name was Brad Dickerson. And we kind of just, we hit it off. He ended up joining the team. He worked with us for about 4 years. And, we were on track to go public in 2022. And when, the window closed because the markets shut down, he kind of looked and he was like, look, I'm kind of your guy to help you go public or be a public company CFO. There's not really a lot for me to do if we're going to stay private. So Brad ended up moving onto the board. And then in 2023, I had kind of raised my hand and I was like, look, I think I'm starting to feel like I might be ready to step down. The business is getting more and more complex. It's being far more focused on operational efficiency. And I didn't feel like there was a lot of building left to do. So I rose my hand. I told the board I was ready. And Brad very shortly after was like, I have a great guy that I used to work with at Under Armour. He was our former GM of North America. So I think he'd be a great fit. And so, amongst a couple other candidates, we interviewed Jason and, he made it all the way to the end and, took the prize home.
That's very funny. And took the prize home. I didn't know that you were about to go public. That's very similar to the Rockport story that they were going when we were working with them on all the walking work, and they were about to go public, and then they sold to Reebok. So that's an interesting
sort of when you're going through that process, you can't really talk about it. Because there's never a certainty until you're out the door. But now it's a few years behind us. Talk about it. Because it didn't happen.
It did not. No. Look what happened. You got a great relationship here, Dave. For our listeners who don't know Bombas, and I hope that all my listeners know Bombas, and I just have to give the plug that I have given Bombas for holiday gifts to my colleagues, to clients, and it is the smartest, easiest, most memorable gift. You got to get the size right, but that's a little bit of homework. But I hope that everybody who's listening will do that, because I want you to have more sales, because the 1-for-1 model is a beautiful thing. But if you could just give in a condensed basis, because our first podcast, and we'll put that in the show notes, really talked about the history and how it came together. But I love the fact of where you found that little tiny insight and how that insight has become a company of a huge size with great impact.
So when we talk about the brand, right, Bombas is a mission-driven premium basics and footwear brand that donates an item for every item that we sell to those experiencing homelessness. The foundation of the business came to be when I saw a quote on Facebook that said, socks are the #1 most requested clothing item at homeless shelters. And I remember kind of stopping in my tracks thinking, I had no clue, right? I would have thought it would have been shoes or jeans or jackets or, something more substantial. And I also kind of was like, wow, that's sad. Here's an item of clothing that I don't spend more than a few seconds a day thinking about, and yet it's the most requested clothing item for those experiencing homelessness. And so I remember, it kind of percolated with me, and benefit of living in New York, I had regular interactions, with people experiencing homelessness. So I started carrying socks around in my book bag, and to and from work, I would hand them out, and I'd get these reactions from people like, oh my God, how did you know this is what I needed? And I'd watch people take their shoes off and they'd wrap plastic bags around their feet, and so then as this idea started to, formulate, we started reaching out to giving, homeless shelters and partners to really understand more about this need. And they said, well, yeah, if you're living on the streets every night, you're afraid to take your shoes off because you don't want them to get stolen. Walking everywhere is your main mode of transportation. So you adds up to a lot of foot hygiene problems. And if any of us are, stepped in a puddle or something and had a wet pair of socks, and it like ruins your day. And here are these people they don't have the option to swap them out. They don't have access to washing machines. So foot hygiene becomes this big issue amongst this population. And then, since I was like, oh, we're going to donate a lot of socks, we want to solve this problem in this community. I was like, well, how are we going to do that? Like, it can't just be like a gimmick. We can't just say like, oh,
Right.
like we're going to be this, So I was like, we got to have a great product on top of it. It's got to be, this kind of double bottom line approach where like give the consumer something that's so good, and then you give them a great reason to buy it, and and then that kind of creates that flywheel of them coming back or them telling their friends about it. So we spent 2 years on product development and basically took a category that for most people, even the biggest companies making socks, treated as an afterthought. It was how cheap can we make it? 12 pairs in a plastic bag.
Right.
And I was like, you know what else you buy 12 of in a plastic bag? Toilet paper. So like, this is a product that people didn't really like put a lot of consideration into outside of the hyper-focused athletic market. And so, I looked at running socks and cycling and basketball and ski, and I realized there's all these technological innovations. And so I started to wonder, what if we took the technology and innovation happening in the athletic market and brought it to the mass market, and just tried to sell people a better sock? Everyone's walking around all day on their feet. Why should athletes be the only ones who should feel comfortable and supported? So that was our thesis. We launched in 2013. And here we are, 13, almost 14 years later. Built a massive brand and had a tremendous amount of impact. And yeah, we're pumped. Couldn't have asked for a better outcome.
And I read that you're approaching 2 billion in lifetime
200
sales.
million.
200 million.
Oh, sorry.
Lifetime sales.
I think it's over 3 billion now.
Now, great.
Yeah.
And then you've donated 200 million items. How many?
Yeah, that's right.
Number?
So 200 million items donated to those experiencing homelessness here in the U.S.
That's amazing. So Jason, okay, so you're coming in, and this company is just doing it great. And the thing I loved about Dave is he's so, and I don't know if it's part of the Babson education because I love Babson. You were very focused on 3 constituents: your consumers, your homeless population, your recipients, and your giving, those organizations that were your giving partners. So Jason, you came in, and I'm sure you had a lot of great background. I mean, certainly Under Armour, that's amazing. So you must have said, gee, I can't screw this up. So how did you start? I'm very curious because I think that, a lot of the emerging purpose-driven companies listen to our show and they're growing and they want to bring in, talent to balance the founder. So, okay, it's first week, second week, you're sitting there. I see that you had this great quote and you said, when a new CEO walks in and assumes things done in the past were stupid, they get themselves into big trouble culturally. I've been fortunate to avoid those potholes. So how did you make this work?
Well, I think there are a few things. Not all of them are, special or different about me. But I think, while Dave grows up with this amazing, entrepreneurial spirit and this belief that you can start a company from anywhere, what I grow up with is an amazement of the people who do that.
That's great.
And so, what the idea that you could create a business out of thin air off of a Facebook quote or, in your apartment at night with some friends when you're trying to work a full-time job. I think it's an amazing thing about the American economy in general. And I have so much respect for entrepreneurs and the people who start from scratch. And I've been lucky to work with a handful of them in my life who are just incredible folks. And I think really inspiring for me. And so my reverence for this place comes from before here, but it is also for here. And so, I try to come in and understand that what got us here is obviously amazing. You create the most successful brand in Shark Tank history without me. You didn't need me for that. How do you just make sure that you take the things I know how to do, which is scale brands into multi-category, multi-channel, global businesses. Part of the way this is a good handoff is Dave says, "Can you believe it got this big?" And I say, "I can't believe it's only this big." And that's a great marriage, right? Because, when Dave says, "Oh, there's no more building left," and I'm thinking, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm getting here this early," then that's a wonderful place to have the handoff from. But I think the fundamentals of this business are incredible. We have great product, great mission, and great culture. And so for me, the thing is, great, how do I take the things I know how to do around scaling brands, but doing it in a way that never messes with the culture and the mission and the product? And this place is an amazing product engine, but as you mentioned, we have such an amazing giving network of partners. And then we have, really wonderful employees and a wonderful culture around this place. And my job is to just help us, triple, quadruple, whatever is the size of the number of items we can give, but to do it without messing those three things up. And hopefully I'm navigating that okay at this point.
Dave, how's he doing? He's doing okay.
I mean, I think one of the things that, Jason, that really, attracted me to Jason is, we did this CEO search. And, we talked with a bunch of folks that had run, big billion-dollar brands. And, Jason ran a $3.5 billion P&L at Under Armour with 900 employees. And almost every single other candidate we talked to said, if I'm going to join, I've got to be CEO on day one. And, and in all the people I talked to who've gone through these transitions, they were like, see if you can find someone who will come in a different role, COO, president, whatever, so that if it doesn't work out, like there's no whiplash for the team, right? You're guarding the team that like, I'm not leaving. And then okay, I'm back. And then I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And Jason was like, I don't care. I'm in this thing for the long run. Like, I'll do whatever it takes. And so joined as president, for 9 months. We got to get to know each other, figure each other out. And then, when it came time, for me to step down, it was such an easy transition because the team already knew him. They already understood him. It felt so much more natural, but it requires, in this world, especially when you're stepping into kind of big opportunities and big jobs, you can, I think my biggest red flag with a lot of candidates was like, how much ego do these people have? And,
right.
And as Jason's proved, he was just so honored to be a steward of this brand going forward and really respected the founder's journey, that, I just admire that so much.
I'm sure that an ego and calibrating that and the step up, that's really key. I'm sure our listeners are saying, "Hey, Dave, what's your role these days?" So what are you doing that's fun and you love to do it at the company that you birthed?
Yeah, so my title is officially executive chairman. It's kind of this made up title, I think, for founders. So it's like a transitional title when, you're not CEO, but you don't want to be president, and, you want to still be involved in the business, but you don't want to really run the day to day anymore. So I see myself as, Jason and I kind of co-lead the strategy of the business. Any of the big kind of, hey, should we go into retail? Should we launch in Target? When's the right time to push more into international? Should we launch into this product category? Should we hire these big roles? All of the really big meaty stuff, Jason and I have a great collaboration on. Jason, very fortunate for me, loves the day to day. I think I got burnt out a little bit over the years. But he loves being in the weeds and getting into the tactical. Oh, we've got to switch our warehouses in the middle of holiday, and there's 150% tariffs, and how are we going to move our supply chain? I did that for 13 years. I'm very happy to hand that off to somebody else. And where I'd say I spend the other kind of 50% of my time is really on this AI revolution. The way that AI is moving and changing, how we're all doing work. When I was in Jason's role, I used to get, 300 or 400 sales pitches a week. And I just hit delete on every single one of them. Now I have the time to actually sit down with, solution providers and new AI companies to say take me through a demo. And, 9 times out of 10, it's not a fit, but every now and then, and especially with this AI stuff, you're like, oh, we just saved the company 100 hours of work a week, or the leverage that's going on. So it's new and it's exciting and, it's fast paced. So that's where I'm spending the other part of my time.
And it's great because your energy is like super over to the max, and you continue to love what you're doing. So Jason, what advice do you have for ascending CEOs as you have in this situation, to those listening to the podcast, in terms of, not screwing it up?
Well, I mean, look, I think maybe it depends a little bit what sort of situation you're walking into. But I think, for me, I've been able to work in companies that were really healthy companies doing really well. If you're an ascending turnaround CEO, it might feel a little bit different for a company that's on, on some sort of like existential path, so to speak. But I mean, in my world, I think it starts with just knowing what you don't know. This place has a wonderful listening culture. It started with Dave and the other founders, and I think it is still that kind of a place. And it's important that you fit in. Your first day of high school, if you think you're going to walk in and run the place, I don't care about what your title is or anything else. Like, I think you're doing it wrong. So I think it's important to blend in, and that means you got to go to some events, and you got to spend extra time to figure the place out, because at the end, for me, it's not just about what you say. It's also about what do people need to hear.
Okay.
And it's impossible to know that on your first day. What they need to hear and the manner in which it's going to make sense to them in the context of the place that they work or they go to school or something else is really important. And so I had a mentor long ago who said, try not to make any decisions your first 100 days in a new role. And that's hard to do. And I certainly didn't live up to that here, but I tried. And I think just that time is worth it. But here, it's easy to go do volunteer time with other members of the team. It's easy to go to our retreat and spend time that doesn't feel like working time.
Yeah.
It's easy to stay in some of our events after work and spend time with people, to be here for Take Your Kid to Work Day and those things. And participating in those is how you build relationships and start to get a feel for what a place is like. But while Dave says we have this made up title around executive chairman, what I would also say is it gets pretty lonely to be a CEO. This is the second time I've been one, but the first time I've been one with an executive chairman who I get to lean on a regular basis. And that matters for me. It helps me do my job better. And it might feel like a made up title for founders sometimes, but the reality is it's a wonderful safety net for me to feel like I always have somewhere to bounce things off of, when we're making key decisions. And I've really benefited from that.
I'm curious, when you first started, did you go to some of the giving partners? Did you actually go on the streets and meet with homeless individuals and talk with them? I mean, how much of your time did you just to kind of, soak up that key element of, core of your business?
Yeah, I mean, a lot in the first 60 days, a lot. So we do sock drops out of the office where you just take a bag of socks and care packages and everyone heads in another direction. So, I was doing that my first week. Kelly Cobb, who does an incredible job running our giving partner network. Kelly, takes me through, this is the way that we hand things out. These are the words we use. This is what it means. These are why these statistics. She handed me a reading list and I've been through those books and then went out and volunteered with our partners at City Relief. Or now, I split my time between New York and Maryland. So I spend time, donating time with our partners in Maryland as well. And that time in the first 60 days gives you not only a sense of this company, but it's a good reminder of why what we're doing is important. It's just, it is incredible education. And I certainly feel like I'm home.
Oh,
but Carol, I'll also add that, it might be unknown to your listeners, but, that wasn't just something Jason did in his first 60 days. As an organization, our giving team, sets up between 15 and 25 what we call giving events every month. Every month that employees sign up for. And to give you an idea of how we know we've found the right people, for new employees, we also often have to block out spots on certain events because there's so much demand from our team to want to go and volunteer. Now, sometimes they volunteer during the workday, sometimes after, sometimes before. But giving, and interacting with this community in person is a core component of our culture. It's not just something that Jason did in his first 6 days. we all do it every month.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very normal part. Thursday morning, I'm serving breakfast at the Bowery Mission here in New York, and I'm blocked off until 10 o'clock, and people know that I don't have any meetings. And my administrative assistant is out for half a day doing a give back tomorrow, and I just know I won't have any support during that time. That's a very normal part of being at Bombas, and it's I think it's part of what attracts people here, but also keeps people here, because it's a great reminder of how important the work is that we're doing every day.
And haven't you won like every major award about having the best culture? I mean, you won a lot of those awards.
Been pretty consistent, yeah.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. Do you have a formal policy about volunteerism time, or is it just fitted into your job?
It's fitted into your job, but we track it like any other KPI or metric that companies track. We track every month, number of hours volunteered as a team, and we've got a goal for the year. And every one of our quarterly meetings, we stand up there and we say, this is where we're at. And sometimes we're like, we need to get more involvement, we need to log more hours. Sometimes it's we're ahead of plan. We track it just as much as we track revenue.
Okay, so Shark Tank. I am obsessed by being an entrepreneur. I'm obsessed. I watch it. It's like the TV show I watch when I go to bed at night. How bizarre is that, right?
No, it's a feel good.
Oh, well, I love to see them. I love to see the repartee. And I heard that you and Randy, you studied, show after show after show. I love this fact. This is very much a David. And you had all the list of all the questions. You had all the answers because you did not want to screw up. And so it's amazing. I don't know if you want to just share a little bit of insight to anybody who needs to go on that show, wants to go on that show. But then I want to go from there to Jason and David. How do you pick the extension of the line?
Yeah.
So tell me.
I'll cover Shark Tank quickly. In 2013, we started the business, and in early 2014, we got an email from one of the casting directors at Shark Tank. I guess they saw our Indiegogo crowdfunding campaign, which had done really well. And they were like, hey, do you want to come try out for the show? And we thought it was a scam at first, but, we obviously followed up with them. We ended up making it all the way onto the show. And as you said, this was been in business for 9 months. And if you're familiar with the show, it can go one of two ways. It can either go really well or it can go really poorly.
Really bad, yeah.
And so we said, look, if this is a big moment that we're going to have in front of 15 million people, we better be prepared as much as possible. And so, we watched every episode, and we watched all the ones that did really well. We watched all the ones that messed up. And, we tried to track all the questions that were regularly asked of us and had answers for those so that we could try as much as possible to control as much of the narrative or the outcome as possible. Look, it's live, it's quote unquote live television in the sense that it's not edited, it's not recorded from, that you don't do multiple takes. And so whatever you say, that's on camera. And our number one goal was not to get a deal. Our number one goal was don't look like an idiot in front of millions and millions of people. So we wanted to be prepared as possible. So that was our approach. We ended up getting a deal, and it was an absolutely catapultic moment for the company.
And are you still working with Damon, John, today?
Yeah. I mean, we run a very large company now, so Damon's still there to help as an advisor, but this machine is quite large now, so there's no one single influence in the organization anymore.
But he's happy with his investment for sure.
Yeah, it's done very well.
Yeah, very, very well.
Number one brand on Shark Tank.
Isn't that amazing? Oh my God. And it's an amazing show. They're so cool. So Jason, okay. So you had socks, and you've had socks for forever. And I read, maybe this is the wrong statistic, 80% still of your sales are socks, and I want you to know, I just bought a bralette and a panty. It hasn't come yet, but I'm looking for it. I was a jockey girl, but or Hanes. I want to see how really great your stuff is. I'm sure it's great. And of course, I'll proselytize like crazy. So what's the decision process to expand? I know that the desire for a homeless person after socks is underwear or a t-shirt? Both?
Underwear and then t-shirts.
And so how are you making those decisions? How to expand the line? Because also I see you're in footwear. I also want you to talk about retail in a minute too.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it's an intersection, I would say, Carol. I mean, we have great merchants and great product people here who have a perspective on what we could make that would make a difference to the consumer. But we also do a great job listening to the consumer here. We have such great relationships with the people we wear test with our non-paying customers who give us feedback, or where our mission-based partners give us feedback, because we're a direct-to-consumer business, or how we started. Still more than 90% of the business is direct-to-consumer. We get a lot of direct feedback from customers, and we utilize that feedback to start thinking about what the next things are. So I think you come at it from both directions to think about where the customer wants you to be, or where they give you permission, and where your product folks think that we can continue to live up to our expectations when it comes to quality and comfort. I think when it comes to the mission side, far and away, that number one thing is still socks, as you point out. Even today, with 4,000 giving partners, we have thousands of partners on the wait list waiting to be added. So we know that continuing to grow our business is the best way to service them, because we continue to run a one-for-one model. So that's really what we pay attention to. But you can imagine, because we have a great sock business, that socks naturally come to cozier socks, and cozier socks become, slide-on slippers, and then those become kick-on slippers, and then slippers, indoor slippers become outdoor slippers, and, sort of a natural progression, because the customer just keeps saying, I love your product, but I really want something I can walk the dog in. I love your product, but I'd love to, have it closer. I love your t-shirts, but I'd love to have a bralette. And so, that's a bit of us coming at it and them coming at it. But we have a great relationship with our network and our community, and we're able to really test that product to make sure that it lives up to, to our standard and worthy of our brand. So you know what you're getting. Excited to get some feedback when you touch it.
I will. I'll let you know about my product. I'm curious about when you develop t-shirts and other underwear, because with your sock, our listeners need to know this isn't just a sock. It's not just the consumer sock that you then know. It's got technological improvements in it, because it has to, it's black, so it doesn't show a lot of the wear. It lasts longer. It's got microbial benefits. Do you do those sort of things with the t-shirts and the underwear that will be donated? So they're super built, per se?
Yeah. So, what you're referring to is early on, it was really important to me and the other founders that we weren't just donating some, crappy product, to those, experiencing homelessness, because this is a population that often gets leftovers, right? They get, hand-me-downs, they get donated items, things we don't want anymore, food we don't want anymore, which naturally makes them feel inferior. And so when we started out, we were actually donating the same product that we were selling to our customers to our giving partners. And, they were gray and they had bright, colorful colors all over them. And we started hearing feedback from our giving partners that they were like, oh, well, do you just a black solid sock? And I said, oh, well, we don't, but what's the ask there? And I said, well, black shows less dirt. And so it's a dignity aspect. And, so as they're walking around, they don't want to look like they have dirty white socks on and stuff. I was like, wow, what else are we missing? Right. Oh, well, this technology that we kind of, put on our socks, a seamless toe, which makes it so you don't feel that bump on your toes. Well, it's a little bit more of a delicate, seam. And so, wear after wear after wear, it's a weakness point that could potentially, deteriorate over time. So they said, well, these people are wearing these socks basically, all day, every day. So let's reinforce the seams for greater durability. And then, as you mentioned, we used an antimicrobial treatment to prevent the growth of fungus and help with odor. So we re-engineered this sock product for the needs of our non-paying customers, those experiencing homelessness, that was far better to fit those specific needs. And so when we started developing underwear and when we started developing t-shirts, went back to the same people. We said, well, what's
Great.
important in a t-shirt, and so, looser sizing so that they could layer, t-shirts over other pieces of clothing, still similar antimicrobial treatments, same thing, darker colors to help show, the minimal wear. It's not, they're not revolutionary ideas, but for this population, their needs are very different than yours or mine. They don't have access to a washing machine. So, if you don't, how would you create a product that's different? And so every product that we produce, all of our donation products are specifically designed and engineered with the same level of scrutiny that we design and engineer our products for our paying customers.
That's wonderful. I know that, and I've read that you're going to experiment with retail, and I was surprised that one of your stores is going to be in Boca Raton, which is right near me. I live in Wellington.
It's already there, Carol.
Is it there?
Start experimenting. We're there.
Hey,
We're there.
Okay, so I will look at this. I'm buying product. I'll go kick the door open, check it out, whatever. So why retail? And why in Boca? I think you're also in New York, so I get New York, but why Boca?
Yeah. So, I mean, Carol, we still live in a world where, for our categories, 65% of the sales happen in physical locations. So, you got to meet the customer where they want to be met also. We have wonderful wholesale partnerships like Dick's Sporting Goods or Scheels or Nordstrom, and those are great. But we only have so much space in those stores as well. And so what retail gives us a chance to do is to show the full breadth of what we offer, to show tees and underwear and bralettes, to show footwear, to show slippers, to show socks, all in our space in a dedicated way that's branded and gives us a chance to talk about our mission. If you go to our store in New York, you can sign up to donate time with some of our giving partners when you're in the store. So, those are things that we can do to even deepen our connection that we can't do from a wholesale perspective. So we're testing. But because it's a test, we picked different zip codes on purpose, that places that we do well overall, but we want to get an understanding of how the customer is going to respond. So we have one store in Texas and one in Florida and one in New York. And, those are going very well right now. So we'll open up a few more locations this year and watch how that continues to evolve. But these just give us an owned canvas to be able to put our own paint on them a bit. And that's been a really nice step forward, and the success has been real. So we're excited about what it means for our brand.
So I'm curious, what are consumers, and maybe they're first-time consumers, and I'm sure, Jason, is that you have been in the store and you've been listening. What are you hearing? And are you hearing differently? Also, is the New York consumer probably different from the Florida consumer versus the Texas consumer? I'm just curious about what you've heard. I'm sure you've been in those stores listening.
Sure. I've been in those stores a lot. I live very close to the store here in New York, so I go to that one more than they probably like.
And where is it? What's the address? What's the address?
It's 345 Bleecker Street.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So it's a great place. But yeah, I mean, certainly the first thing we hear is, wow, there's a Bombas store. Actually, if you listen out on the street or outside of the store, you'll hear more surprise than you will inside the store, which is great.
Okay.
But remember, like our brand, we have 44% aided awareness in this country. So people know Bombas. Maybe they haven't tried it yet, but people know Bombas. And more than 70% of our customers know our mission. So they understand that we're a one-for-one donate brand. They understand why we are here. Many of them saw Dave on Shark Tank years ago or watching reruns today or whatever. So people know our brand, and the surprise tends to be that, I've never seen a Bombas store, which is true. You haven't. We've only had a few of them for about 6 months here. But inside the store, what does change is sock height, Carol. How tall you want the socks really does depend. In Florida, it's a lot of ankle socks, more so than it is, as you might get in New York. So we see some of that. And one of the other things that we see a lot overall in the stores, more than we see in our e-commerce business, is just how much the kids business pops off. So people may not be searching for it the same way, but when they see it, the socks are so damn cute that they can't help but.
I know, baby socks are too cute. Yes,
so cute. And so yeah, everybody walks in, whether you're parents or grandparents or friends. It's easy to walk in and see them and then want to take a gift out with you. So we've been seeing the kids business trend up in the retail stores probably as much as anything.
That's fantastic. I am curious about your giving partners. You said that you've got a waiting list. And so that's a good thing, but it's also a bad thing. What are you thinking about? Is it that you have to grow in sales to be able to service the giving partners? What's the barrier to be able to add, 1,000 more by the next time we chat?
Well, that's definitely the goal. Oh, go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
Oh, go for it.
I was going to say that is the goal, Carol. Actually, over the next year, is to add 1,000. So, so you're spot on to the way that we think about it. But the easiest way to do that, since it's written into the bylaws of this company, is to sell 20% more. You can service 20% more partners. I mean, it's as simple as that. So, we never deviate from that. That's why Dave says we don't talk about volunteering once a year. We talk about it every time we talk about the metrics of the company. Is one of the things we do every day. And the same for our giving partners. But that's the goal, is continue to grow the company, and we'll donate what they ask for. Sometimes they want more underwear. They almost always want more socks. That's still far and away the most requested item. But that's the goal, is to try to continue to get them off. And the way to get them off that wait list is just keep growing the company.
And the reason that we don't add more today is because once we bring a giving partner on, we want to make sure that we can service them, on an ongoing basis, so that it's not because these become things that, it's really, they really rely on. And, if you tried to assign a dollar value to it, right, we're going to donate something like 35 million items of clothing. These are items that these people would typically have to purchase themselves because they're not being donated. I don't know, apply $1 or $2. This is a $35 to $70 million, budget that we're essentially, freeing up for these organizations. If that went away the following year, they'd scramble. They'd be, oh my God, we allocated money towards other services. How are we going to get the socks back? So we have to be able to keep the service level, for the partners that we currently have before we add on additional ones.
And again, I want to underscore the thoughtfulness and the focus that you look at your stakeholders, the consumer, the giving partner, and the homeless individual. It is not a bolt on. So many companies, it's bolted on, and this is totally built in from the very, very beginning. So thank God you've got that magic connection making gene in your brain. That's wonderful. Let's talk about 5 years into the future. 5 years, things are going great. People need what you need. You're so thoughtful. What do you envision or wish when we have this conversation 5 years from now?
I mean, I'll go first.
This is your show now, so
I guess that's officially the baton pass, right? I think actually the most important thing, Carol, is that we continue to carry this mission around the world. The reality is we have 4,000 giving partners here in the U.S. We have our first 4 giving partners outside the U.S. right now in Canada. And there's so much need, no matter what. At 200 million units donated, we have 4,000 giving partners and people on the wait list, all that you pointed out. So that's only in the United States. So the ability for us to make a difference, to bring a little comfort to those who really need a little comfort, I don't think that's, confined to the 4 walls of the United States or whatever else. I think that's really the biggest thing, is do we carry this brand to something that means something around the world? I think that's really the most important thing. Now, that will mean that we'll be in different channels on the way there, and I'm quite sure that we'll continue to expand what categories we can be in. We'll continue to show, the elasticity of our brand and where the customer invites us into their closets. But the most important thing 5 years from now is that we're not recognized as a U.S. brand, but as a global brand who continues to, deliver this 1-for-1 mission and continues to do good in the world, proving that you can be profitable and you can make a difference all in the same breath.
Jason also has a personal goal as well, where, he said, it took us something like, 10 years to donate 100 million items. He's like, well, I want to be here in 5 years. Let's do 100 million items in 1 year.
Ooh.
100%.
Okay. Big dreams.
That's a little personal goal, but you're right, Dave. I carry that one around with me every day.
That's great. Young people who want to do what you're doing in their own way, I'm sure you must get a lot of, going back to Babson, do you give speeches? And I'm sure you've got lots of friends with their kids who are saying, oh, I really want to work in a social responsible business. There's a lot to that. But from both of you, what 1 or 2 guidance, might you give things guiding these young people to try and either start a company or work for a company? How do they get
Yeah.
into somebody like Bombas?
I think for me, I always tell people, if you've got an idea for a mission or a give back or whatever, don't just put it down on a piece of paper, go and live it. Right. And for me, that was, I started carrying socks around in my backpack, and I started, having conversations with people, living on the streets here in New York, and, people that I didn't really interact with in the same way, other than maybe buying, a bottle of water or giving some money here and there. And once I started to hear these stories, right. And then once I started to volunteer at the giving partners and start to meet this and have a relationship with this population, that, that is what drove me, and honestly still to this day continues to drive me to do the work that I do, right? It's those individual, it's hard for my brain to even imagine what is 200 million items. Like, I can't, it's such a large number. My brain can't even compute what 200 million items even looks like. But when I have a one-on-one conversation with somebody, right, and they're walking around with, holes in their shoes and no socks on, like, that to me, that I can relate to. That I'm like, wow, that must be a horrible situation to be in, walking around in the cold in New York and wet and snowy, and you don't have a clean pair of socks on. Those individual stories. So I always tell people to get as close to the mission as possible, because that's where I think you will find the motivation and inspiration.
Great. Jason?
Well, look, I just think that the people who start with their heart, like Dave and his partners did with this business, they're not the majority. And so sometimes young people feel like they have to find, or they have to follow the path that's laid out in front of them. They get a little distracted by the shiny objects. I'm supposed to work here. I'm supposed to put this brand on my resume. I'm supposed to, whatever. And the reality is, like, you only have so many trips around the sun, so, like, it's always going to be work. It's always going to be hard, but it doesn't feel like it if you love it. So figure out what, what you'll love enough to do it. And don't let somebody else's shiny objects get in the way. I think, you got to decide for yourself what value is. Work is a little more like art like that. As long as it means a lot to you, it doesn't matter if anybody else appreciates it. So I think that's the message. And sometimes I think you get that sort of lemming mentality early in your life where somebody told you you're supposed to work at this place or that place because it's so hard to get a job there. But really, like, you just, at some point, like, you're going to spend 60 hours a week doing it. You better like it.
Thank you. Yeah. Young people today, some don't want to work 60, and I go, but you got to put in the time. It's up to, they got to love it. If you love it, it's not time.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's also about, it's not just about time, but it's about skill development. I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, if I want to get better at the piano, then practicing 60 hours a week will be better than practicing 20 hours a week. And I think if you want to be in Dave's shoes one day, then, you got to be willing to spend that time. But if it feels like a cost, you're doing it wrongly. If it feels like an investment in you or in a mission or a cause, well, then investments pay off in the future. Costs just go out the window, So I think it's got to feel like that. But if it feels like an investment, something that you think can pay back, then it doesn't matter how much time you spend at it, because every minute is an investment in you or something that you're building that's bigger than that.
Very well stated. So we're ending the show this year with fast track questions that should have one word or a few words. And I'm going to let you both answer them. So the first person's going to be like surprised. Second person might have a little time to think about it. But here goes. So the first one is for Jason. How's that?
All right.
What one word that best describes Bombas, either about its culture, impact, or products? One word.
Purposeful.
Okay. Dave.
I'll say thoughtful.
Okay. Right. Now this one's going to be Dave first. What keeps you hopeful on the days that this work feels heavy?
That we produce an incredibly high quality product that people seem to love, but that they love also for the brand and what we stand for. I mean, every time I meet a customer, they're always like, "Oh my God, I love your socks, but I also love your mission," right? And the idea that we're not just we're producing another product into the world. We're actually spreading, hope and thoughtfulness around humanity to, all of our customers. That's what keeps me going.
Super. How about Jason?
I think it's the time that I spend with our giving partners, to be honest. I think they do. When our work feels hard, go out and see how hard it is to help somebody get ID, to be able to get on a list, to be able to apply for housing that might be able to be a temporary solution. Like, go sit for that. And then how hard does my day look? I think our partners do really, really incredible work. I feel honored that they're part of the network. And those are the days that you remember how simple it is to come just do our small part.
That's beautiful. Okay, this one's for Jason. What's one lesson you've learned at Bombas that you couldn't have learned anywhere else?
I think here we prove that, like, the small essential details matter. I think, as Dave pointed out, I spent a lot of my career in apparel, but this category, particularly around socks, is an afterthought for big brands. And I think paying attention to the tiniest details of something that feels essential but maybe overlooked is something that I think we're uniquely good at it. And I feel like I've learned even more about it being on the ground.
Super. And the same thing for you, Dave. What's one lesson you've learned? You've learned lots of them because you've been there longer. But is there one or two that, like, this is, like, really important?
I think the thing that I learned, is that, it is possible to do it all the right way, right? We have, we treat our employees well, we treat our customers well, we treat our giving partners well, we treat our partners well. We grow like crazy. We're extremely profitable. Like, we didn't have to sacrifice anything, right? We didn't have to sacrifice being bad corporate citizens. We didn't have to sacrifice, selling a crappy superior product. We didn't have to sacrifice having an amazing customer service policy. We didn't have to sacrifice the way we treated our employees and gave everybody equity in the business. We just did it all, and we're still class leading growth and class leading profitability at a massive scale. And I hope that shows to other people that you don't have to compromise.
And you mentioned in our pre-discussion about being the torchbearer, which I thought was a beautiful thing, since we just had the Olympics and what that means. And so I like that view.
Yeah,
he does. Okay, Jason. Let's see. So, okay, what's one small action people can take to make a difference for people experiencing homelessness today?
Oh, I think volunteer. Go to bombas.com today. We have a directory of those 4,000 giving partners. You can look them up by state, by zip code. Go find one of our partners. These people are doing incredible work. Go give 3 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours or whatever you can, because that little bit of time, not only can you make a difference that day, but as Dave points out, these are finite budgets. So, every volunteer hour is one unpaid hour for them. And that's another $20 that goes toward something else that they can provide for people who are experiencing homelessness. So find a way to give a little bit of time. It makes a huge difference.
And, I didn't know about that. It's very much like Patagonia Action Works, where, local environmental groups, you can go and sign up. So I think it's great. We need to promote more about that exists. So what is one small action, Dave, that besides volunteering, that people can help?
I'll give two small actions. One is, this is a population that oftentimes feels and goes unseen, feels invisible. And I do my best to always have a pair of socks on me or a protein bar or something that I can give. And if I can't, even just when these people say, hey, do you have anything? Even just acknowledgement and to say, hey, I'm sorry I don't have anything, but I hope you're having a great day. Or even just a smile or a wave. You watch these people go from glim to, oh my God, somebody recognized me. You see them light up with this huge smile. And then I also say give unconditionally. There was a great article, an op-ed from the Pope many years ago in the New York Times. And he says, you don't give with condition. You don't say, I'm only going to give you $1 if you don't buy, a bottle of beer, or I'm only going to give you this if you do that. You just say, I don't know what your circumstance is, right? I'm just going to give unconditionally, whether it's $1, whether it's some food. You don't pass judgment. You just give, because I think the thing that I've learned in doing this work, the thing that's probably the most surprising to me in getting out in the field, is there are a lot of these situations that any of us could find ourselves in. And the one that shook home the most for me is we were volunteering out in California at one of our shelters on a trip. And I asked this guy, I said, how'd you end up here? And he said, well, I was driving in a car with my wife and 3 kids, and we got in a car accident, and they all died, and I lived. And I don't know anybody who wouldn't, risk, falling into depression, wouldn't want to not go to work, wouldn't, maybe turn to, substance abuse, just to get away from that level of pain. And, I just remember stories like that. People don't choose to get themselves into those situations, right? Life happens to them. And so you just have a little bit of empathy, give people the benefit of the doubt, right? And, and even if they are substance abusing, maybe that's the only thing that they can do to, get through the day. And you don't know what the circumstance is. So you just give.
That's a beautiful story. It's a very sad story too. If you could leave listeners with one idea or feeling today about Bombas, your involvement with Bombas, what would that be? One idea or feeling.
Yeah, I think I would love people to walk away and hopefully feel inspired. That's my mission in life is to continue to help people, and as much as I can do that as one individual, I hope that people will see, what we've created, what we continue to do, the values and standards we hold ourselves to, and maybe walk away and say, like, if you have a business, maybe say, oh, I wonder what could we do to give back to our community, or give back to, some cause that might be meaningful. Or, if you're just, if you're an employee, maybe you can start a group in your company that can volunteer together. There's always something that we can do, to get more involved, to give back. It doesn't have to be, start a multi-$100 million company that donates hundreds of millions of items of clothing to those in need. There's small scale efforts, that all of us can do, to impact someone's life in a better way. And I hope people listening to this, feel some sort of inspiration to do something positive in the world.
I love that. So I always thank you both. So I always give the last words to my guests. So that was a beautiful statement, Dave. And I don't know if you want to add on to it. I want to give Jason a chance.
I'll let Jason take us home.
Okay, Jason, bring us home.
Well, I'll maybe just build on that for a second. I think that there are too many people who believe that the giving is an expense. And they don't really think about the fact that being purpose-driven can actually help you run a better company, not just talk about it. I think it helps us run a better company. And I think, our founders proved that here. And I think it'll continue to be part of what we do. It helps us attract better talent. It helps us tell our story to consumers. I think it builds a connection to our brand that matters more. It helps us make a difference. And that difference means, more people are cheering for us, even from the sidelines. I think the culture of this place is built around us donating that time. And so what does that mean for long-term retention and happiness of our employees, and therefore the output and the kinds of things that can come from this kind of an organization? The giving of 35 million items and whatever that cost this year, that is an investment in running this place. And I think that's what our founders have proven, is that you don't have to be giving back or profitable. I think they're actually multiplicative if you do them well. And I think hopefully more people are interested in Dave's story around building this place, because we're certainly not unique in those who can make a difference.
Beautifully said by someone who's been supporting the purpose movement for decades. When I hear this story and we have this conversation, I just had Vincent Stanley from Patagonia on the podcast, and he wrote a book with Yvonne. Vincent is now the director of philosophy at Patagonia. So he was there in sales, and he's been there forever. He's actually the nephew of Yvon. And this book, The Future of Responsible Business, the first 50 years, I feel that that's, in a way, you are at that place. I hope you're going to capture a lot of these details, because that next book, that's a beautiful book, by the way. But the next book, because you are so authentic, you are so real, you are so integrated, you are so focused. I hope that a book will be written, but I see you in, when we ask consumers or other businesses, who is a really embedded, purpose-driven company? And they're going to say Patagonia. And then they're going to follow it with Bombas. So I want to, you guys are great.
Carol, if you come to our office sometime, you'll see carved in the side of the wall on your way to the kitchen is a plaque that says a few things, but one of the things it says on there is make sure your grandkids wear Bombas. And I think that's
great.
If our grandkids are all wearing Bombas, then it'll be worthy of a book.
I think you're worthy of a book before then. So thank you both. Thanks for coming back on the show. I think next time I have you back on the show, it won't be like 3 or 4 years. That's too much of a, we want to see all the great new things that you're going to do. And I want to see the line expanding, and I will go to Boca and take a look at, and I'll give you some feedback. I promise to do that. So
love that.
Yeah, I know our listeners are going to love this. We're going to promote the heck out of it. I know my next holiday gift, what that's going to be. So thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for your focus, Dave, Heath, and your heart, and Jason for getting it, and for being a wonderful partner to a wonderful story. So thank you for coming on to Purpose 360.
Appreciate you having us.